I used to believe that life was about finding simple joys in small, everyday things. For me, that joy came in the form of a controller, a screen, and my son sitting beside me, his face lit up with excitement. Every evening after work, we would huddle together on the couch and dive into our shared world, Fortnite. What started as a way to connect with my son after long hours at the office became something deeper, a bond that nothing else seemed to strengthen in the same way. My wife, however, never understood it. At first, she tolerated our routine, chalking it up to a phase. She called it harmless fun and even smiled when she saw us laughing over the headset chatter or celebrating a win with a loud cheer. But as weeks turned into months, her tolerance began to sour. She grew distant, critical, and dismissive. She stopped joining us for dinner. She stopped asking how my day was. Eventually, she stopped talking altogether, unless it was something cold and logistical. She thought I was wasting time. She thought I was avoiding responsibilities, even though I never missed a bill, never left the house a mess, and always made sure our son had everything he needed. I coached his soccer team on weekends, helped with homework, and managed a full-time job in marketing from home. But none of it seemed to matter to her. She didn't see the effort. She only saw the console. The first time she rolled her eyes and called me a man-child, I laughed it off. I thought she was joking, but that phrase became her refrain. Every time she saw me with a controller, every time she overheard our son's excited voice while we played, her face tightened with disapproval. One night she came home late, didn't acknowledge us, and went straight to bed. I found a half-empty wine bottle in the kitchen and a look in her eyes that I hadn't seen before: contempt. Our intimacy faded. I chalked it up to stress, to work, to life just getting in the way. I told myself we'd get through it. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that I'd plan a vacation soon, that maybe we needed a date night again. But deep down, I knew something was changing. I started noticing small things. She always kept her phone face down. She changed her passcode. She took weekend trips under the guise of self-care and stayed overnight at her sister's more and more often. I dismissed the red flags because I wanted to believe the best. I told myself she just needed space, that she was trying to find herself again. Meanwhile, my son and I continued our routine, the world of Fortnite becoming our escape from the tension that had settled over the house like a storm cloud. There was a particular night I'll never forget. We had just won a difficult match, my son and I, and he turned to me and said, "Dad, I wish Mom would play with us one day." I smiled, ruffled his hair, and told him maybe someday she would. But in my heart, I knew she never would. Her disdain for our bond had grown too deep. That weekend, she didn't come home. She didn't answer her phone. I called her sister. No answer. I texted her repeatedly. Nothing. My stomach churned with worry, not just for her safety, but for the possibility that this was the beginning of something bigger. My son asked where she was, and I didn't know what to say. I told him she was taking some time for herself. When she finally returned on Monday morning, she looked different, cold, disconnected. She didn't even say hello to our son. She went upstairs, packed a bag, and told me she needed space. I asked what that meant, but she didn't elaborate. She left without kissing our son goodbye. He stood at the door crying, asking if she'd be back for dinner. I told him she just needed time, but I was lying. I could feel it. This wasn't about needing space or clarity. This was something else. That night, I stayed up thinking about everything. The nights we spent laughing, the times we dreamed of a future as a family, and how fast everything had unraveled. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the controller that now felt heavier than ever. Still, my son needed me. And no matter how broken I felt, I knew I had to be strong for him. So the next evening, we picked up the controllers again. Because while she had chosen to leave us behind, I knew I couldn't walk away from the one thing that still mattered more than anything else. The days following her departure were strangely quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your chest, that makes even a ticking clock sound deafening. My son asked fewer questions after the first 2 days, as if his young mind had already begun the painful process of adapting. Children are so much more resilient than we give them credit for. He didn't cry often, he didn't act out. But I noticed the subtle changes, how he stared longer at the front door, how his laughter became shorter, how his once excited chatter during our gaming sessions was now peppered with pauses. I kept our routine going because I didn't know what else to do. We played Fortnite each evening just like always. It became a ritual not of joy, but of survival, an anchor in a house that had started to feel unfamiliar. I still cooked, cleaned, worked my 9 to 5 job remotely, and made sure my son got to school on time. Outwardly, everything appeared stable. Inside, I was unraveling. The unanswered questions were the worst part. Why had she left without a fight? Why didn't she want to work things out? When did she stop loving us? Me? I kept looking back, retracing steps, analyzing every moment where things might have gone wrong. Was it really the games? Was it the way I parented? Was I too soft, too distracted? About a week after she left, I received an email. No subject line, no greeting, just a short, cold message saying she'd be staying with someone else for a while and that she would reach out when she was ready to discuss custody. That word, custody, hit me harder than I thought it would. Not because I feared losing my son, but because of how impersonal it was. She had gone from my wife to a stranger in less than 10 sentences. The mention of someone else confirmed what I'd been too afraid to admit. There was someone else. A man, probably. Someone who didn't spend his evenings in digital battles with his kid. Someone who, in her eyes, was more of an adult. I imagined him older, suave, maybe someone from her gym or work. Maybe it had been going on for months. Maybe all those weekends away weren't about self-care at all. I never replied to the email. Instead, I poured everything I had into my son. I helped him with his projects, cooked his favorite meals, let him stay up late on Fridays so we could have pizza and play duos together. I wanted him to feel that even if one part of his world was crumbling, another part was still solid, unshaken. I became more than a father. I became his constant, his safe place. But even as I did that, I couldn't ignore the ache gnawing inside me. I missed her. Not just the version of her from the end, but the woman she used to be. The one who laughed at my jokes. The one who held our baby for the first time with tears in her eyes. The one who made pancakes shaped like animals on Sunday mornings. That woman had vanished long before she walked out the door, and I hadn't seen it until it was too late. Nights were the hardest. When my son was asleep and the house fell into that deep, empty silence, I'd sit on the edge of my bed and scroll through old photos. Birthdays, vacations, first days of school. I couldn't believe how fast things had changed. I couldn't believe how easy it was for her to erase everything. I began seeing a therapist, quietly and online, just to try and make sense of it all. I didn't tell anyone, not even my family. I needed a place to speak the thoughts I was too ashamed to say out loud. Like how I felt humiliated. Like how I was beginning to wonder if playing Fortnite with my son had really made me seem childish. Like how maybe I had failed, not just as a husband, but as a man. But each time I looked at my son, I reminded myself that I was showing up every day. I was present. I was loving. I was doing the best I could. And for him, that had to be enough. Slowly, I started rebuilding my confidence, not in giant leaps, but in small, everyday victories. Finishing a work project, getting my son to laugh, cleaning the garage I'd been avoiding for months, and despite everything, I never stopped playing with him. We didn't always win, but the laughter started to come back. His spark returned bit by bit. I knew I had lost a part of my family, but I hadn't lost all of it. And I refused to let the damage she caused destroy the bond we had built. She may have walked away, but I was still here. Weeks passed, then months. My wife, ex-wife now, technically, never came back. After a few formal emails through lawyers, we worked out a basic custody agreement, though she only visited our son once a month at most. Her presence became more like a guest appearance in his life, rather than a parental role. She had traded in birthday parties and bedtime stories for a new life that didn't include us. I, on the other hand, was transforming. Not all at once and not in some dramatic cinematic way, but in subtle layers, like the way sunlight returns after a long storm. The first major shift happened at work. A side project I'd been quietly developing, a freelance app for gaming parents to connect, share tips, and organize matches, caught the attention of a small startup. They liked the concept. More importantly, they saw potential in me. It started with a consultation offer, then a retainer, then, within 6 months, a full-time position. I transitioned out of my corporate role and into something I actually loved. It paid better, gave me flexibility with my son, and reminded me that I had value far beyond the walls of my broken marriage. My hobby had become a career, and that realization alone was like stepping into the light. Meanwhile, my relationship with my son had evolved too. He was growing up fast. Our gaming sessions became less about escaping pain and more about genuinely sharing joy. We talked more, laughed more. His grades stayed strong, his mood brightened. He still asked about his mom sometimes, but never with sadness. More like someone wondering why a character in a story stopped showing up. The house, once full of heavy silences, now felt warm again. I started making small changes, painting the living room, rearranging furniture, buying new bed sheets. Little acts of claiming the space, of saying, "This is ours now, not hers, not theirs, ours." Socially, I reemerged too. A friend from my son's school invited me to a birthday barbecue, and I almost declined, instinctively retreating behind the comfort of routine. But I forced myself to go. That's where I met Emily. She wasn't flashy. She didn't come at me with flirtation or drama. She was just kind, calm, smart, the kind of woman who listens, really listens, when you speak. She was also divorced and raising a daughter. We connected over shared experiences, single parenting, career changes, learning to forgive ourselves. Our first few hangouts were nothing more than coffee in the park, while our kids played nearby. Then came a museum trip, then dinner, and before long, she became a regular part of our lives. My son liked her, trusted her. That alone meant everything to me. With her, I never had to pretend to be more mature than I was. She saw the value in how I connected with my son through games, how I balanced fun with responsibility. She didn't think it made me a child. She thought it made me engaged. One rainy evening, while Emily and I sat on the couch watching our kids build in Fortnite creative mode, she said, "You're one of the best dads I've ever seen." I didn't cry, but something inside me finally exhaled. That invisible weight I'd carried for so long, the one that whispered I was never enough, started to dissolve. Professionally, things took another leap. The startup I'd joined launched my app idea as a full product. It took off fast, faster than we expected. Within a year, we had tens of thousands of active users, mostly young parents like me. We formed partnerships with schools and family brands. I was named head of product. Articles were written, interviews were requested. I was against all odds, becoming successful in a field built around the very thing I was once mocked for: games. I'd gone from the immature gamer dad to a respected tech voice in the parenting space. And every time I passed my son the controller or high fived him after a clutch victory, I knew I hadn't just bounced back, I had leveled up. My ex? Occasionally, she'd send texts asking how we were. They were hollow, surface level check ins. She never asked about our lives in depth. I never volunteered much. We were strangers now, connected only by a child she barely knew. Sometimes I wondered if she ever regretted it, walking out, choosing a new life, abandoning what we had. But I didn't dwell on it. I was too busy building something better. And the beauty of it all? I never stopped being me. I didn't give up the games. I didn't erase my quirks. I just stopped apologizing for them. Because in the end, it wasn't immaturity she ran from. It was the mirror I held up to her. The joy I found in simple things. The emotional presence she couldn't match. The resilience she didn't expect. She thought she was leaving a boy behind. But what she really did was give a man the space to rise. It had been nearly 3 years since the day she left. Time, like erosion, had smoothed over the sharpest edges of that pain. I no longer woke up wondering what she was doing or who she was with. My days were full, full of my son's laughter, full of work that fulfilled me, full of quiet, healthy love with Emily. Life had reshaped itself, not back into what it was, but into something stronger. That year, I took my first real vacation since the split. Emily and I decided to take the kids to Spain for the summer. Part family adventure, part celebration. The startup I'd helped build had just closed its biggest funding round yet, and I had reached a place where stepping away didn't feel risky. It felt earned. We chose a quiet coastal town outside of Valencia. It wasn't tourist packed, but it had everything: cobblestone streets, golden beaches, and enough culture to keep the kids entertained and the adults inspired. Every evening felt like a watercolor come to life. Sunsets bleeding into the sea, soft music drifting from nearby cafes, the smell of grilled seafood carried on ocean wind. One afternoon, while the kids were building sandcastles and Emily was off browsing a local market, I decided to grab an espresso at a seaside cafe. I sat under a striped umbrella, watching sailboats glide past the horizon. I wasn't thinking about the past, wasn't reminiscing, wasn't inviting ghosts to my table. But they arrived anyway. I saw her before she saw me. She looked thinner. Her hair was darker, but not by choice. It was the kind of dull, faded dark that comes from box dye and exhaustion. She wore sunglasses too big for her face, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. There was no sparkle, no confidence, no arrogance left. She didn't look like the woman who had once dismissed me as a child playing games. She looked lost. I froze, coffee cup in hand, as she stepped off the sidewalk, walking toward the same cafe. She was alone. When her eyes met mine, something flickered in them. Shock, then recognition, then something resembling embarrassment. She approached slowly, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet, tentative, almost rehearsed. I won't repeat her exact words because they don't matter. What matters is what I saw behind them: regret, deep, weathered regret. She asked how our son was. I told her he was happy, thriving, and in Spain with me. Her eyes widened. Whether from surprise that I had custody or that I could afford such a trip, I couldn't tell. She admitted awkwardly, that her life hadn't gone as planned. The man she left me for had moved on quickly. The new life she'd run toward had dried up like a shallow stream in summer. She was working odd jobs, renting a cramped apartment, struggling to keep up. There was no malice in her tone, just fatigue. I nodded politely. I felt no urge to attack her, no need to brag about my success. I didn't even feel the satisfaction I thought I would. What I felt more than anything was distance, like I was speaking to someone I once knew in another lifetime. Her world and mine no longer overlapped. After a few minutes, she excused herself. She said she had to go. I watched her walk away, disappearing into a maze of alleyways and pastel buildings, and then I turned back to the sea. Emily returned shortly after, unaware of the encounter. I didn't tell her right away. It didn't seem necessary. The past hadn't returned to stir chaos. It had shown up to prove that I no longer belonged to it. That evening, I watched our son run across the sand, his joy pure and unfiltered. He called out to Emily, who laughed as she chased him. I stood back for a moment, just watching, and I realized something. Closure doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it comes in silence, in the simple contrast between what your life used to be and what it has become. Seeing my ex wasn't some pivotal moment of revenge or justice. It was just a reminder of how far I'd traveled. She had seen me at my lowest and decided I wasn't worth sticking around for. But life had disagreed, and now, here I was, living a story she could no longer even imagine. The boy she mocked had become a man she couldn't recognize, and in that truth, I found peace. Returning from Spain, I felt something settle deep within me, like an emotional knot had finally unraveled. The unexpected encounter with my ex hadn't stirred rage or heartbreak. Instead, it affirmed that I had long since outgrown the pain she left behind. That version of me, the one who felt rejected, humiliated, and broken, was gone. What remained was a stronger, fuller man, a father, a partner, a leader. At home, life picked up with its usual rhythm, but I found myself paying closer attention to the quieter moments, helping my son with homework, catching Emily's smile when she wasn't looking, waking up early and sitting on the porch with a coffee in hand before the world stirred. Success no longer felt like a trophy to wave around. It was peace. It was stability. It was love that didn't demand I become someone else. My relationship with my son had only deepened over the years. Our shared time playing Fortnite had grown into something much larger. We'd started tackling new games together, building Lego models, and even working on small coding projects. He wasn't just my son, he was my teammate in this journey. I could see the confidence in how he spoke, the way he carried himself. He was a boy being raised by a father who had stayed. And Emily, she was nothing like the woman I had married before. She didn't roll her eyes at my passions. She didn't belittle me for how I connected with my child. She joined in. When she noticed how important those gaming sessions were for us, she didn't treat them like wasted time. She sat with us, learned the controls, even laughed at her own clumsy attempts to keep up. The life I had now was not the one I imagined during the early days of my marriage. It was better. It was real, built not on idealized romance or flashy promises, but on trust and understanding. It didn't require me to hide parts of myself just to be accepted, and that made all the difference. Professionally, things kept growing. The startup I'd helped shape had become a serious player in the market. We'd expanded into Europe and South America. I was no longer just part of the team, I was steering it. Investors began to see me not as a wild card dreamer, but as someone who had proven resilience and vision, and I led with a humility that only failure can teach. One day during a quiet evening at home, I received an email. It was from my ex, a short message, no venom, no apologies, just a brief update. She was moving again, trying to start over. She hoped our son was doing well. She didn't ask for pictures, she didn't ask to reconnect. I sat with that message for a while, and then I deleted it. She had made her choices. So had I. And I had no interest in revisiting what we had lost when there was so much in front of me that I was still building. Months passed, then years. My son grew taller, his voice changed. He made friends, earned awards, and talked about someday making games of his own. He didn't ask about his mother much anymore. He remembered the things that mattered: the nights we stayed up playing games, the breakfasts we cooked together, the road trips, the time spent building a treehouse in the backyard, even though neither of us knew how. And I never stopped cherishing those moments because I knew what it was like to almost lose them. Eventually, I married Emily. It wasn't a big wedding, just close friends, family, and one very excited best man, my son, in a sharp little suit, grinning like he'd just won a game we played together. That day wasn't about correcting the past, it was about celebrating the life we had built in its wake. Now, when I look back, I don't see betrayal as the end of my story. I see it as the push that forced me to become more than I was. I lost everything I thought mattered, but in rebuilding, I found what truly did. So, yes, I still play games. I still laugh with my son. I still get excited about the small things. And maybe that makes me a big kid. But I've learned something important. Being a grown up doesn't mean giving up joy, it means knowing what to fight for and who's worth sharing that joy with. And in the end, I chose right.